What's good people, and welcome to the Silly, Nerdy, Sometimes Wordy podcast, and I'm your host, BK, and this is episode 57, The Lord of the Rings, War of Rohirrim, spoiler review of this animated film. Again, Lord of the Rings, War of Rohirrim, spoiler review. And in this episode, I'm going to be sharing my spoiler review thoughts of the animated film Lord of the Rings and some nerdy notes about Lord of the Rings information, the financials of this, and some upcoming new Lord of the Rings live action movies. So if you haven't seen the movie, pause it, take a look, and come back. If you don't mind spoilers, you've been warned. All right. What's going on, everybody? I am back again with another episode, a little bit more lighter this time. I just released a previous episode about the 6888 film that is currently on Netflix, released December 20th, 2024. Go check out episode number 56. What's going on, everybody? I hope we are all doing well. We're just going to get right into it. I have some nerdy notes, so let's get to the nerdy notes. And in this episode, I'm focusing on some financial information of the film industry, particularly about this film, this animated Lord of the Rings, War of Rohirrim, and just Lord of the Rings overall. I'm going to read a little bit from ScreenRant.com. They have this report, and I'm going to read, quote, "The newly released Lord of the Rings War of Rohirrim was fast-tracked to ensure that New Line Cinema kept the franchise movie rights. The anime film released on Friday, December 13th, and has seen a disappointing box office return, placing fifth in its opening weekend. The $4.6 million debut set a new low for the Lord of the Rings feature film in the Peter Jackson era. However, the box office performance might not have been the studio's primary concern. Per Screen Rant has confirmed that after the War of Rohirrim was announced in 2021, it was fast-tracked by the studio to ensure that Lord of the Rings franchise movie rights was remain with New Line Cinema. This would buy time for Stuart Jackson, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and to plan out the live-action films, The Hunt for Gollum, and yet another to be named." That is the end of that story per ScreenRant.com. Okay. So the $4.6 million debut, that is this film that I will be talking about, the animated Lord of the Rings War of Rohirrim. It debuted with a $4.6 million box office on opening weekend. Now, the budget for this film was $30 million, which is not much. And how much of this $30 million is the marketing is undisclosed. I could not find it anywhere. But you have a $30 million budget and your opening weekend is $4.6 million. That is not good. Not good at all. It is not even half that. And so that is extremely low and disappointing. But as the story said, that this film, when it was announced in 2021, it was fast-tracked pretty much to keep the rights of the film franchise under New Line. And so otherwise they would have lost it and another studio would pick it up. So in a way, they put this out quickly because also in 2021, it was announced that a new set of films are going to be coming out later in a couple years. The first one is The Hunt for Gollum, and I'm not sure. I believe Peter Jackson will either be, I know he's going to be involved as a producer. I'm not sure if he's going to be directing it, or maybe Andy Serkis will be the director. I think Andy Serkis will be the director, and Peter Jackson will just be involved in the creative process. Of course, Andy Serkis is the actor director. He is the guy that does all the motion capture for the Gollum character and many other characters in Hollywood. So I guess that kind of makes sense. Fast track this animated film so you can keep to get the movie rights. These new live action Lord of the Rings films. And the first one, The Hunt for Gollum, is set to come out, projected to come out in 2026, which is almost a year once we get through a couple more days here in 2024. So it kind of makes sense. But, this animated film was not marketed well at all. Like I said, I don't know how much of that $30 million is the marketing budget, but from what I've seen, they didn't do too much on the press tour. I know that they did some stuff with Collider, and they've done some stuff with Warner Brothers, but they didn't. It wasn't a heavy push to get this film marketed, to get it in front of eyes, they just didn't put a lot of effort into the marketing of this film. Not a lot of people probably don't know about it unless you're just a hardcore Lord of the Rings fan or just a movie fan in general. And sometimes maybe you just casually or mistakenly come about it. But it's unfortunate. As it stands today, as I'm recording it, worldwide, the film has made a little over $16 million. Again, the budget is $30 million, so it hasn't even broken even. And to break that down a little bit more, this is per Box Office Mojo. Like I said earlier, it opened with $4.6 million opening weekend. Internationally, as it stands today, as I'm recording, overseas, it has made $7.9 million. And domestically here in the U.S., it has made a little over $8 million at $8.1 million, bringing the grand total to a little over $16 million. So it hasn't even, it's a little over half of the budget. The budget was $30 million. And so it hasn't broken even. And I believe I saw a story last week. It looks like it's going to be going to digital very soon, within a week. Last week it said about 2 weeks. It's going to be going to digital, which is not good. If a movie goes to digital within a few weeks of it coming out in the theaters, that means it's bad, it's flopped, and it hasn't made its money, hasn't performed well. So luckily I wanted to see this in theaters. I was actually excited about it, and I thought it was good, but it's just unfortunate that they did this. Like I said, the film wasn't really marketed well. I feel like they didn't do a real good press tour. It's just a few places that I've seen. Maybe it's been more besides the two I mentioned. Of course, I'm pretty sure they did some press in New Zealand because that's where these films are made. That's where they're based in terms of the creators, with Peter Jackson and Philippa. That's where they're from, and that's where they filmed many of these movies, the live action ones again. So yeah, that's that with the finance part of it. But I am looking forward to seeing The Hunt for Gollum, so a new set of Lord of the Rings films coming out. Hopefully they do not get delayed. Okay, moving on. Let's get to the main point of this podcast, the actual film itself. Again, this is Lord of the Rings, War of Rohirrim. This is a spoiler review. And this is an animated film. And this is still within the Lord of the Rings universe in terms of the 6 original films. This story takes place 100 years prior to Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings, at least 100 years, maybe more than 100 years. So the movie starts out, kind of puts you right in that universe, black screen, feel like it's Galandria or maybe a different woman voicing over, setting the scene, a dark screen with her talking. And this is how this movie starts out, just like the Fellowship of the Ring. So it puts you back in there. So I did love that. And the music in this film is a character on its own. You hear all the themes and it takes you back to Middle Earth, all the great themes from the first three original movies, which is amazing. I believe they got the same guy that scored the films to do this one as well. And then also we have 4 actors and actresses that were in the first 3 films to come back to do this film. Christopher Lee, who plays Saruman, he was in this. He made a quick cameo at the end of this film. He plays Saruman in the original films as well. And then you also have Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd. Of course, in the original Lord of the Rings films, they played Pippin Took and Mary Brand Buck in the first 3 Lord of the Rings films. And so in this animated film, they came back to voice 2 orcs. And then lastly, you have Miranda Otto. Now, she was Eowyn in the second and third Lord of the Rings films, The Two Towers and The Return of the King. And she voices the same character in this film, but I'm not sure how that works. I guess her character is alive, obviously, in this film, and then by the time we see her in the second and third of the first trilogy, tried to find some type of videos to explain that, but couldn't. But so that's interesting. But it's cool that they came back to do this film and have some connective tissue. But in terms of the story of this film, I really enjoyed it. It was an interesting take, starting off with, it was kind of a bit of a battle between people from Rohan and the other city, other town, which I can't think of the name of right now. It escapes me. But the 2 fathers, battle or kind of have a little fight, and he just hits him with one punch and he dies, and the son comes, will obviously come back to take revenge. And the story goes from there. And Eowyn, the protagonist, the female lead, she eventually takes on a prominent role in this, and I just I liked it. I like the it's set in the world of Lord of the Rings, and there's connective tissue. I'm not going to go anything in this film review beat by beat, but at the towards in the film you see the orcs. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that Saruman shows up at the end. That's a little bit of connective tissue. And Eowyn, she doesn't become queen. She wants to kind of go and do her own thing. But she says, where is she going? She goes to see, I'm going to see this wizard to tell her about these 2 orcs and why would somebody want rings? And then someone asks her, what is the name of this wizard? And then she says, he's known by many names. And then she drops the name Gandalf. And then it's like, oh, so then that's where you go, and kind of the mystery and the story of what ends up being the Fellowship of the Ring kind of starts before we see it in the Fellowship of the Ring. So there's lots of connective tissue from this animated film, but it is its own film in itself. So it's not like you need to watch this film to watch the Fellowship of the Ring, but if you do, it is nice. So if I were to go back and watch the Fellowship of the Ring, you can understand. And of course, Helm's Deep is where the big battle takes place, and Helm's Deep is where big things happen in the Two Towers and in Return of the King. So Um, so that's just there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of connective tissue between this animated film and the three original films. And like I said, having the some of the original cast come back was really really nice. Um, yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was. I know it hasn't gotten great reviews. Every it's been poo pooed on, but for my taste, for what I saw, I enjoyed it. Every time I see negative reviews, it's terrible. You always have to go for yourself and see for yourself. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. Movies are subjectives. You can have your own opinion about it. Some people can hate it, some people can like it or love it. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. And it was just nice to go back to Middle Earth again. I just wish this was marketed a little bit better. Not to say it would have made $1 billion or a lot of money, but I think it would have made much more money. Definitely would have broken even and made a profit off of this if they would have marketed it better or took their time with it. But understandably, they wanted to get this out so that they could retain the film rights for Lord of the Rings, so that they can have more time to develop, make, and film the new live action films that are upcoming in the next few years. So it's understandable, but they did what they had to do essentially. And yeah, that is, I think that's all I have to say, I believe. And I guess one other thing, I had this thing I tried out earlier this year where I was keeping track of how many movies I was watching this year, whether it's in the theaters or streaming on different platforms like Disney Plus, HBO Max. So my goal was to get to 50, and I certainly did that with the last two, watching 6888 and this Lord of the Rings War of Rohirrim. I made a spreadsheet. I got all nerdy and everything, so that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to do it again. My goal, hopefully, is to get to about 65 movies between watching it in theaters and streaming it online, or watching Blu-ray or DVDs as well. So we'll see if I get to 65 for 2025. Anyways, that's just a small thing. That's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. And yeah, hope you have a great holiday season continuing. And check me out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Just search the name of the podcast. I'm on iHeartRadio, Pandora, and Audible, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, we will